Thank you guys for hanging here until the end of Project NOSH. It's an honor to be associated with this group. I've known Jeff for a long time. He's become a good friend in the industry, and the last couple days have been a blast. And I love hanging out with all these food fighters in this room. I've had the pleasure of working in natural foods in Boulder, Colorado since the mid-90s. And there have been some failures. I started a yerba mate company that I poured all my money and my heart and soul into with one of my best friends, Dwayne Primizich, for 5 years, and that did not work out. But there was a lot of success achieved in that pursuit also. The key is kind of making sure that you can monetize the lessons that you pick up along the way. I'm not going to talk a ton about Bobo's. I'm the CEO of Bobo's in Boulder and have a lot to say about that company and all the good that we're doing right now. But what Jeff asked me to talk about is more just lessons along my path and try to get really specific to the tactical, specifically a topic that I'm not super fond of. I think it's kind of really dependent on your personality type, but cash is probably the 9th or 10th topic that I'd like to talk about in business, but it's really pertinent. As you can see from the title of this presentation, we're calling it Cash is Like Oxygen, and to take a quote from Warren Buffett, and I will quote here, cash, though, is to a business as oxygen is to an individual. Never thought about when it is present, the only thing in mind when it is absent. When bills come due, cash is the only legal tender. Don't leave home without it. Similar to the son or a spouse, I think we would all say that cash is one of those things that when it goes away from you, it really starts to hurt in ways that maybe you had not anticipated. At Bobo's, we did a Series A, and we're reclosing a Series B right now. And I would say that raising money is a big distraction from really operating well commercially and with your leadership team and kind of thinking about key points of strategy. It really takes you off the track and makes you focus on relationships with private investors, which is really important to the business, and kind of managing founders' expectations, which is really important to the business. But ultimately, it doesn't help you build velocity and build a brand and build a team and improve your product and so on. And so as I go through just kind of a recap of a few lessons that I've learned, what I want to touch on are some of the brands that I've been experienced with, where cash and its scarcity became a problem enough to really get us off our strategic path, and then how I'm trying to think about it today as the CEO of Bobo's in a way that will kind of help us all make better decisions. All of these brands I've had the great honor of working with in Boulder, Colorado. I was at Frontier Natural Products Co-op in late 90s, early 2000s. The company was based in Norway, Iowa, but our marketing office was in Boulder. Pixie Mate, again, that's a company that I started with a great friend of mine, Dwayne Primizich. Simply Organic was born inside of Frontier. I was at Legacy Silk, which is not Danone Wave. There's a lot of great people that are kind of circulating natural food companies that have worked with Danone Wave. I worked with Legacy Silk. I had the great opportunity to work with Steve Demos for a few years. He was a guy that was kind of walking around in Boulder in the 70s with a red wagon full of tofu when there were no events like Project NOSH back then. Let me tell you, it was very, very few people in the industry that were really championing this cause. I noticed that Phil Anson's in the back room. He's the founder of Evol. When I was at Boulder Brands, we purchased that business, and that was similar to how I've heard the Health Warrior acquisition be referred to. That was a bit of an acqui-hire where we not only wanted Evol, but we wanted Phil Anson on our team. Earth Balance was a brand inside Smart Balance that was there before I got there, and then Glutino and Udi's were a couple of brands that we picked up when we decided that at Boulder Brands we wanted to play hard in the gluten-free space. So this is the first of 3 lessons that I'm going to go through, and this harkens back to about circa 2000. The USDA National Organic Program got finally decided and implemented in this time. And what consumers faced prior to this was a variety of different labels that indicated what was organic, and it didn't mean the same thing in every state or from every certifying agency to the consumer. Whole Foods played a great leading role in trying to capture the consumer sentiment and turn that into the USDA. I think it might have been the largest letter writing campaign of all time. In fact, I think that there were so many letters that the USDA had never seen so many letters in its entire history as what came in that 60 or 90-day window. But the outcome was that USDA organic symbol that we take for granted today. At the time, I was already at Frontier, and we decided that we were going to create a brand that would come to embody what that new product benefit meant. And really looking back to a really successful brand in the 80s, Healthy Choice, which came to be intimately associated with low fat, we thought that we could do the same thing with organic. We went out and we hired some of the best sales leaders in the country. I mean, we had vice president GMs on Albertsons, on Safeway. They weren't together at that point. On Kroger for the natural industry. We had a VP GM at Publix. And we immediately got top-to-top meetings, and we talked about how this brand that at first was just a spice brand, but was going to launch as many as 90 products in about 9 months, competing in 9 new categories, finding 2 to 4 new co-packers that were all very new to us, was going to become the next kind of like Horizon or Annie's or Celestial, if you will. And we achieved an enormous amount of growth, and we picked up a lot of new customers for Frontier, which had been a co-op for almost 22 years at that point. But we got way out over our skis with our forecast, with our inventories, and really with our internal expectations that we had set. And I think, you know, for me, looking back on this time, what I really came to learn from this and take with me is just realistic forecasting is essential. And when you're raising money, or when you're in front of a board of directors, and you know you're forecasting 100% or greater growth, or even 75% or greater growth, you better really understand how fast are those planograms going to be implemented, how fast are you going to be able to achieve a velocity, what kind of a marketing budget are you putting behind that launch, so that you're really going to be able to compete with Kraft Blue Box in macaroni and cheese with an organic macaroni and cheese product. And I would say that, you know, for us at Bobo's today, we talk a lot about every piece of distribution that we picked up. We're going to treat it like it's our first. There's been a lot of discussion in this room about Walmart today. We at Bobo's are going to totally kick ass at Walmart. We're not ready for it yet, and we keep telling ourselves that because we need to get the awareness at Albertsons, Safeway, and at Kroger, and at Publix, and at Wegmans just rocking. I gotta be a legitimate threat to Cliff Bar, Kind Bar, Lara Bar before I'm going to deserve placement in a couple of thousand Walmarts. And so we're working really diligent on Albertsons and Safeway, and on Kroger, and at H-E-B, Wegmans, Publix, et cetera, to make sure that we can play in that conventional world before we take a big step into mass. Painful natural foods cash lesson, number 2. This is going back to Smart Balance, which became Boulder Brands. Smart Balance was an incredibly profitable brand, and at one point in time was really fast growing. What happened in about 2011, was the consumer base that was buying Smart Balance was actually dying to the extent of like losing 2 to 4% on an annual basis, because it was boomers. It was only really old people that were looking for this heart health benefit, and it didn't matter what kind of innovation came out of our marketing group. Younger people from my generation down were not going to be attracted to this. At about this time, natural foods acquisitions began to really heat up, and the attractiveness of like Chobani and everything that they had accomplished on Greek yogurt was really enticing to us. Our CEO, Steve Hughes, at the time would say to the leaders in the company, our IQ as like managers of a food business is intimately associated with the category in which we compete. Go find another version of Chobani, and let's kind of pivot this organization into that direction. At the time, Carol Byers, who I think is listening out there on the interwebs at someplace today, she was in charge of our strategic develop as an organization, and did a lot of research with some data and said, okay, you know, Chobani and Greek yogurt, that whole trend might have already bloomed, but gluten-free is pretty hot, and the number 1 and number 2 brands are for sale in Colorado. We ended up, are for sale, and one of them is in Colorado, I mean to say. We ended up buying the number 2 brand, which was Glutino, and then 18 months later, we bought Udi's. And then about 18 months after that, we bought Evol, and we had tremendous success with those businesses. When we bought Glutino, the business was about $60 million in revenue, and in under 2 years, we were at about 110, 120 million. And we bought Udi's. It was about 75 million, and we got that up to like 225 million. I'm talking in gross sales. But one of the things that happened then is that gluten-free began to mature as a trend. I think consumers that had eaten all of these categories that we rushed our brands into began to realize, like, yeah, this whole gluten-free benefit's great for me, supposedly, but these products really don't taste that good. And I think that taste was probably one of the big problems that stalled the ultimate growth of gluten-free. But the other thing is that our team then, just like my team at Bobo's now, and all y'all's team with whatever business you're with, has kind of a range of development and revenue within which you can achieve. And certainly there are rule breakers of teams that stay together for a decade or even a couple of decades, and then they continue to grow that business. But I really think that if I look myself in the mirror at Bobo's right now, when I started the company, did not really have a team. It was under $10 million in revenue, and we're chasing a $50 and a $75 million dream. I wouldn't tell any investor in this room that we're going to get to $150 or $200 million over the next 5 years, because the next question would have to be, with what team? Because you're going to have to completely change over your team and your systems and just the entire operation within which you're working. And at Boulder Brands, when we doubled and tripled our gluten-free business, we hit kind of our maximum capacity. If we had then had the ability to kind of off-ramp those businesses while they were still hot to General Mills or to Kellogg's or to ConAgra, I think that there would have been a whole nother degree of category captaincy that could have happened with our retail partners, with capabilities on the manufacturing side, with R&D capabilities and whatnot. And we didn't see that coming, and we allowed ourselves to kind of hit that ceiling of our own capabilities and still try to forecast a business that was going to grow at a healthy degree that we just couldn't achieve. So as I think about Bobo's and the lesson that applies to us now, that we have to realize that we've brought on private equity. I've got fantastic private equity partners, and we have an agreement. They need to get their money back at some point in time. It's kind of that proverbial 3 to 5 years of an investment window. We all recognize that there's going to come a time to sell this company. We need to do it when we're on our toes, when we're growing at a fabulous percentage rate, and we need to foresee when our limits are going to be reached as a team, as a brand, with everybody that we've kind of encircled ourselves with on this project. So on to my third and last painful cash lesson, and then I'll speak to a couple of solutions here. We're all in a red hot space. We all realize that. That's why Project NOSH has such a high readership, and you do such a great job of selling out events like this here today. There's these great multiples that everybody's exiting with, great innovation, tons of investment that's coming into our space. And for us, what we're trying to do at Bobo's is bake fresh product that tastes awesome first. And then it just so happens that we compete in the nutrition bar category and we compete in the cereal bar category. We think that there's a lot of co-packed, yucky products that have great functional benefits, but consumers are just not really that excited to eat. They don't cherish and relish the experience with the product and with the brand, and that's the role that we're trying to play right now. And Whole Foods is an intimate partner of our process, particularly on innovation. And we've had a good, since I've been here for almost 4 years, we've had a great run with them, with innovation and with co-ideating around ideas like our stuffed product and some of the things that we've done on our bites line. And it was about 12 months ago that the Whole Foods buyer at that time came to us and said, we need some help in the cereal bar category. which includes toaster pastries. That's a real tired category in natural and in conventional. There hasn't been a lot of innovation. There's a lot of like new ideas that are kind of circulating right now. But what we decided to do is to take this machine that we had bought that's a dual extrusion machine and figure out how to make a homemade toaster pastry and sell one toaster pastry for $2.50 up against Pop-Tarts. It sells like 15 of them for $2.50. But we actually are going to infuse quality and make it taste like something that you would get at a great Brooklyn corner bakery. And what ended up happening is we took off about twice as fast as we had anticipated. We grew the category meaningfully. We accomplished about a 40% market share at Whole Foods in the first year on this project. And it took us about 3 times as long to make the product as we had anticipated. And we had just picked up some big distribution on our 3-ounce bars at the same time. So slow products taking off like this can't make high margin product. I'm kind of learning one of those lessons that we learned back at Boulder Brands with gluten-free at that time. And basically what we did is we solved the issue with tremendous amounts of overtime. We had one bakery at that point in time, and we decided that the only way that we were going to get through last summer was basically 2 12-hour shifts every single day for the entire summer. So it just beat the hell out of our bakery, beat the hell out of our team. We burned an enormous amount of capital trying to pay all of that overtime labor, and then had to raise a Series B. So against all of the lessons that I've supposedly learned in this journey, we ran out of cash, and also some of the conventional distribution that we had picked up turned on the returns and allowances machine much more than what we had anticipated. So we've kind of regrouped. We've opened up a second bakery, and we have held off on any innovation this year just to allow ourselves to kind of catch up and get back to the gross margin model that we had been adhering to before we launched those toaster pastries. So a couple more slides here. Key priorities that help keep a healthy bank balance. And this is kind of how we talk in our leadership team at Boulder Brands, at Bobo's, I mean to say. Prioritizing revenue. For us, we have a healthy margin. We're self-manufactured, and a great gross revenue month tends to be a great gross margin month for us because our labor's somewhat fixed. We kind of schedule everybody for the month, and then we turn up or down how much we're going to make based on demand with our current model. But there are ways to get incremental revenue that might not be the most strategic, that doesn't have to be too far off strategy. I'll be honest, like some of those discount retailers like TJ Maxx and the like, you can actually achieve a relatively high ongoing rate of revenue. That's not strategic. It's not a brand builder. But sometimes your company needs some of that extra cash, like an extra $50,000 or $100,000 a month, can go a long way to covering some of your operating expenses. I wouldn't lift your nose at that and say that really denigrates my brand. It's certainly not strategic, but putting that in a priority of revenue and like when are those programs going to happen? Like right now, we're kind of intimately focused on back to school and what displays are we going to get in August with all of our key partners because we can get that sell-in in July and even some of it starting now in June. Continuously achieving cost excellence. We're maniacal about coming together at least every 4 weeks and looking at our cost structure on our product and who's selling us coconut oil and who's selling us oats and who's selling us sugar and when have we last negotiated that UPS and FedEx freight relationship and coming back from trade shows, giving the operations and logistics teams all of those cards of all of the service providers that want to help on logistics and prioritizing those conversations because if your business is growing at 30%, 60%, your costs better be going down, every couple of quarters. And it's key that you kind of continue to partner with your suppliers, but put the screws to them as well. We have an LE process that when I worked at Boulder Brands, we were public. I wasn't there for 6 years. I was there for 24 damn quarters. Public totally sucks. I have no interest in doing that again, but the LE process, as much as I hated all the acronyms, I walked away from that experience with. The LE process is really essential. We come together and we reforecast the rest of our year every 90 days, but we also come together as a team and have this kind of key dashboard that we follow that speaks to quality, speaks to innovation, speaks to morale at the company, speaks to our mission, and we kind of check ourselves and scorecard how we're performing against all of those every 90 days. And there's all kinds of fires that are up for us, in our business. It's really important to kind of recognize that when you're getting distracted, you have to come back every 90 days and figure out what your LE process is on your key financials and your P&L, as well as the rest of the KPIs on the business. Illegitimate deductions drive me crazy. It hurts our industry so much. We have customers. They might be a distributor, they might be a retailer that prey on us. They are inefficient at managing their business, and it's not fair for them to put their hands in our pocket. And I continuously talk about this with our accounting team. When there are illegitimate deductions that are over a certain dollar amount, we never let go, and we fight back as hard as we possibly can, and make them know that it's going to be really painful if they try to put that in the mail or try to take that $5,000 from us. And it just forces all of us to raise more money than we necessarily need. Operating expense, budget adherence. There's no excuse for any team to really blow a budget on OpEx, like your marketing spending or your travel budget or what your rent is. Those are very easy to control. All of you as leaders of the company should demand that that's never over budget. And then avoid infrastructure G&A. We've got a great leadership team at Bobo's, but I get, every once in a while when we're talking about our organization, there's a couple of extra boxes in the potential org build out that get put in, and I believe that we need to be really careful with our cash, and what money we spend at Bobo's is really going to be focused on building revenue. I'm happy to talk about salespeople or trying to build out an Amazon or an e-commerce team, but when it comes to HR and finance and accounting, honestly, you just got to hold and kind of pitch in and figure out what external help you can get to try and get some of that work done. But that's not a great long-term investment, until you've really pushed that to the maximum. Let's see here. Bets that pay. Supporting distribution. Again, revenue solves a lot of problems on your business, particularly if it's driving a lot of velocity growth in your key markets and with your key customers. And for us, we invest in area sales managers. Right now, we've got a team of 9. It'll soon be 12. They don't do demos. They don't do consumer events. They sell. They visit 8 to 12 stores a day, and they're setting up shippers and wooden racks and check lane and coffee bar and power wings, and we got these heartstrings, and they're doing dump-ins and slapping backs and giving away T-shirts and hats in the store. And I find that to be our best awareness driver, our best velocity driver in any market. And when I get a customer to give us a new piece of distribution, that's kind of one of the first places that we talk about with them in terms of collaborating. And when we have a market like Des Moines, Iowa, last week we sent 4 people there, and they were in the market for like 4 days, and they were kind of driving around about 100 miles from Des Moines. But we want Hy-Vee to be one of our biggest customers, and if we can go in there every 90 days and kind of pulse a crew drive like that, we're going to get those displays set up and begin to succeed more and more. High exposure, high growth channels. Airport is really high exposure, really expensive. I'm trying to figure out a solve on those like Hudson News negotiations, but I'm afraid that we're just going to have to pay for that. But we are going to, because we think it's going to drive a lot of eyeballs, to our brand, get a lot of people opening up our oat bars on airplanes. And when you open up a Bobo's on an airplane, you can smell it like 3 rows away. So I think that's a whole nother point of exposure that we're going to capture. But beyond that, we've opened up, Dot Foods has become a great partner of ours. We're up to like 105 sub-distributors through those guys right now, and we get that up and down the street business, which, like in a place like Manhattan, we find ourselves in all of these bodegas or, in other metro markets like in LA or San Francisco, and that just kind of cross-pollinates what you're doing with Whole Foods or what you're doing with conventional retailers. Same with like the ski industry. We're fortunate to be in Colorado. We got a lot of resorts. We overinvest in that. We overinvest in cafes as well. And then innovating with purpose. as it relates to innovation, thinking back to how scattered we got with Glutino and Udi's and all these categories that we had gone into, similar with Simply Organic, I see a lot of brands that have all this innovation, and they're getting on first base with like 5 or 6 different categories. If they brought on private equity and at some point they want a big strategic to buy that company, I think the strategic is going to want to say, with which categories am I going to go get like a number 3 or better share position in the categories that you've competed in. And so we try to like really focus on nutrition bar and cereal bar, and let's continue to win then, and we can go to cereal and other categories later. So Jeff, I didn't leave a lot of time for questions here, but bringing people home and feeding them like families, how we do it at Bobo's, and we're trying to, I guess, continuously learn from all the lessons we've learned along the way.
You didn't leave a lot of time for questions.
You got 13 seconds.
You didn't leave a lot of time for questions, but I don't think you left a lot of information in your hand. I got to say, this kind of transparency, as my seatmate there was saying, this kind of willingness to share both failure and strategy and caring about the natural food business is what this is all about. So I just want to say thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
That was terrific.
Yeah, my pleasure.